November 24th, 1971. Somewhere over southwest Washington state, 10,000 feet. A man in a business suit steps to the edge of the aft staircase of a Boeing 727. In his hands, a canvas bag containing $200,000 in bundled $20 bills. On his back, a parachute he did not choose himself. He jumps. The FBI will spend the next 45 years looking for him. They will never find him alive. They will eventually understand why. But for 45 years, they will not say that publicly. This is the story of the only unsolved hijacking in American history and the investigation that kept hunting a man who was almost certainly dead before dawn. At 2:50 p.m. on November 24th, 1971, a man using the name Dan Cooper purchased a one-way ticket at Portland International Airport for Northwest Orient Flight 305 to Seattle. The flight was 30 minutes, 42 passengers, routine. Shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She assumed it was a phone number. Men did that sometimes, and put it in her pocket without reading it. He leaned forward. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The note told her exactly what he wanted. $200,000 in negotiable $20 bills, 4 parachutes, 2 primary, 2 reserve, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. He was calm throughout. When Schaffner later described him to investigators, she said he was polite, ordered bourbon and soda, apologized when he handed her the note. No shouting, no threats toward passengers, no weapon ever shown. Florence Schaffner did not freeze. She relayed his demands to the cockpit. The cockpit relayed them to the airline. The FBI, already alerted, immediately began sourcing cash. The other passengers were told the flight had a mechanical issue and would be delayed in Seattle. Nobody on board knew there was a bomb or a hijacker until they were safely off the plane. For 50 years, the assumption has been the same. Dan Cooper pulled it off. The perfect crime. He jumped into the Pacific Northwest wilderness, survived, and spent the rest of his life somewhere quiet and free, smiling at the headlines. The FBI hunting him was the joke. He was the punchline they never caught. But here's what the investigation quietly established, piece by piece, over 4 decades. The man who jumped out of that plane almost certainly died that night. Not from capture, not from discovery, from the jump itself. And the FBI, working that probability internally from a relatively early stage, let the myth keep running. Because a live DB Cooper generating tips was more useful to the investigation than a dead one closing it. If you're finding this as unsettling as I did, hit subscribe. We cover the files that were buried, managed, or quietly shelved. New file every week. Back to the story. To disappear, 4 things had to go exactly right. First, the parachute had to open cleanly. Second, he had to survive the terrain-dense old-growth forest, no clearings, in the dark, in November. Third, he had to survive the temperature. The Cascades in November, -7 Celsius at ground level, soaking wet from jumping into low cloud. Fourth, he had to navigate to safety with 200 pounds of wet cache and no known map of the landing area. Not one of these things went the way the folk hero story requires. The FBI sourced 4 parachutes for Cooper, 2 primaries, 2 reserves. One of the 2 primary parachutes was a military NB-8 reserve, a non-steerable round canopy. This is not a sport parachute. It cannot be directed. Once deployed, the jumper goes wherever the wind takes them. The other primary parachute, the one Cooper chose, was a sport chute with a sewn-shut reserve, included by accident, unusable, decorative. Cooper knew parachutes. He did not choose the sewn-shut one. He chose the NB-8. That decision is cited by analysts as evidence of some prior experience. But an NB-8 deployed at 10,000 feet over dense forest in the dark, in 30-degree temperatures, in a wind shear of approximately 22 knots, does not land gently in a meadow. It lands wherever the wind puts it, at night, in the trees. The estimated drop zone calculated from the aircraft's flight path, the jump time, and the known wind conditions covers approximately 25 square miles of Cascade foothills south of Lake Merwin, Washington. Old-growth Douglas fir. Canopy height, 200 feet. Trunk spacing too dense for a parachute descent to reach the ground without entanglement. The forest floor, where it can be reached, is covered in a meter of duff-dead needles, rotting wood, wet moss over hard volcanic rock. No sightlines, no paths, no landmarks visible at ground level. FBI and Army search teams combed this area in the weeks after the jump. With dogs, with aircraft, with infrared scanning equipment. They found nothing. No parachute, no bag, no body, no cache. Ground temperature in the drop zone on the night of November 24th, 1,971 -7 Celsius. Wind chill significantly lower. Cooper was wearing a business suit, a light raincoat, and loafers. No thermal layer, no survival gear. He had not requested any. Exposure in those conditions, wet, without shelter, without movement, produces incapacitation within 2 to 3 hours, death within 5 to 7. If he survived the jump and the landing, if he could walk, if the canopy did not catch in the trees and leave him hanging, there is no serious survival analysis of this jump that produces a living man walking out of those mountains. In February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging at a campsite on the north bank of the Columbia River at Tennebar, roughly 40 miles from the jump zone. He found 3 bundles of bills, a total of 294 $20 bills. Damp, partially decomposed, rubber banded together, the FBI confirmed the serial numbers. The money was from Cooper's ransom. The bills were found face down in the sand, partially buried, in a configuration consistent with having been deposited by river flood patterns, not dropped deliberately, not cached by a living person, not scattered by an explosion. The specific location and sediment layer dated the deposit to approximately 1974, within the range of the jump year, consistent with the bills having entered the river at the jump zone and traveled downstream over 2 to 3 years. The remaining $179,706 has never been found. This is the amount someone would spend if they were alive and spending. Nobody has ever found a trace of it in circulation. On July 12, 2016, the FBI announced it was suspending its active investigation into the D.B. Cooper case. No charges, no arrest, no resolution. The official statement cited resource allocation. The Bureau said it was redirecting its investigative focus toward other priorities. What it did not say, what no official has ever said plainly, is that by the late 1970s, the working probability within the investigation was that Dan Cooper did not survive the jump. The investigation had a structural problem it could not resolve. Every piece of physical evidence pointed to a dead man. Every procedural incentive pointed to keeping the case open. A dead Cooper meant closing the most famous unsolved hijacking in American history without an answer. An open Cooper meant 45 years of tips, leads, media coverage, and the sustained possibility that someone, somewhere, would eventually identify a face. 1,071 suspects were formally investigated. Not one matched the evidence. The folk hero story was more useful to the investigation than the truth. Florence Schaffner gave interviews about that flight for the rest of her career. What she kept returning to was not the drama of it, it was the ordinariness. He was not frightening, he was not erratic. He was, she said, the most controlled person she had ever dealt with in an emergency. He told her, "No disrespect intended, I just have a grudge." She never found out against what. She never found out who he was. Nobody did. Brian Ingram kept the bills. After years of legal dispute between himself, the airline, and Lloyd's of London, which had insured the ransom he was awarded, a portion of them, he auctioned some of them in 2008. A set of 14 bills sold for $37,000 to a man who wanted to own a piece of the myth. The myth had become worth more than the money. D.B. Cooper is the only unsolved skyjacking in American aviation history. Every other case over 2,000 hijackings worldwide since 1930 has a known resolution. This one doesn't. That absence has done something unusual. It created a space the public filled with a story. The story was one man, no resources, no organization, no backing, who held a commercial airline to ransom and walked away clean. The perfect crime, the individual beating the machine. That story required him to be alive. Every book written, every documentary made, every bar argument conducted about D.B. Cooper's identity assumed a living man in hiding somewhere. The evidence, the terrain, the temperature, the parachute, the money points the other way, not conclusively, but with a weight the investigation acknowledged and the public narrative ignored. His remains, if he is there, have not been found. Old-growth forest in the Pacific Northwest produces almost nothing. Organic material, including human tissue, decomposes completely within 5 to 10 years in that environment. There is no body to find. There may never be. The case will remain technically open under FBI classification. A live case requires a living subject. Without a body, the legal standard for closure is never formally met. The myth persists because the evidence permits it. That is the only reason it persists. In 2016, a citizen researcher named Tom Colbert claimed to have identified Cooper as Robert Rackstraw, a former Army paratrooper and convicted fraudster who died in 2019. The FBI reviewed the evidence and declined to confirm or deny. Rackstraw died without confessing, without denying it either. He was one of more than 1,000 names. the last one to die with the question still open. The aft staircase on that 727 was found lowered when the aircraft landed in Reno. The FBI fingerprinted it. They found nothing useful. He had asked Florence Schaffner for napkins with his drinks. She handed them to him. He wiped his hands. The FBI kept the napkins, tested them in 2001 with improved DNA techniques. Partial profile. No match in any database. He planned well enough, or he never needed to plan for after. If this changed how you see the story, share it with someone who still thinks he made it. Subscribe for the next file. It drops next week.